I grew up in a small but warm home filled with the love of my mother. My father was not a rich man, but my mother's care and sacrifice made our little world complete. I remember the laughter of my siblings, the smell of freshly cooked meals, and the comfort of knowing that our parents were there for us. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful. That peace ended the day my mother died. Her absence felt like someone had torn the heart out of our family. My father became a shadow of himself. He would sit quietly, staring into nothingness, as though life had lost all meaning. I was still young, but I tried to support him, tried to be the strong son who could hold things together for my siblings. But instead of healing, my father made a choice that shattered us even further. Only a year after my mother's death, he remarried. The woman he brought into our home was a stranger to us, a woman with sharp eyes, a sharper tongue, and an aura that never felt like family. Her name didn't matter much to me, because in my heart, I never accepted her as my mother. From the very first day, she made it clear. She didn't love us. She didn't even like us. She wanted my father, and only him. To her, we were obstacles, reminders of his past, of the woman he had once loved. At first, my father tried to make us accept her. He told us that she would take care of us, that she would be a mother to us. But his words were empty. Slowly, we realized he was no longer the father we once knew. He began to change. The man who once shielded us from harm started siding with her. If we complained about her insults, he silenced us. If she blamed us for something we didn't do, he punished us. If she demanded something, he gave it, often at our expense. It was as if his love for us died with our mother, and in its place, he built a new loyalty to this woman who despised us. The most painful blow came when she convinced him to sell our family home. That home carried the memories of my mother, the walls that held our childhood, the rooms where we laughed, cried, and grew together. She sold it without hesitation, and my father allowed it. Worse still, we received nothing from that sale. Every penny went into her hands, into her pockets, and into the life they wanted to live together. We were left with nothing, no house, no inheritance, no support. I remember standing outside the house as strangers moved in, carrying their furniture and their belongings, while we stood like exiles from our own lives. My younger siblings cried. I clenched my fist so tightly that my nails dug into my skin, but I said nothing. I couldn't fight them then. We moved into a small, cramped space, a place that barely felt livable. Food was scarce, money was even scarcer, and yet my father didn't care. He was too busy pleasing his wife. She poisoned him against us so thoroughly that he began to see us as burdens. One night, after a particularly cruel argument, he said words I will never forget. You are no longer my responsibility. If you can't live with us, then leave. I have my wife now, and she is my family. In that moment, my heart shattered. But at the same time, something else was born inside me, something stronger than pain. A fire, a determination. If he had abandoned us, then we would survive without him. And one day, we would rise so high that he and his wife would look up from the dirt they had chosen, and they would regret every moment they cast us aside. That night, I made a silent vow. I, Sam, would not be broken. I would fight, I would survive. And one day, I would take my revenge, not through violence, not through anger, but through building a life so powerful, so unshakable, that they would drown in their own regret. But to get there, the journey ahead would be brutal. After my father's words cut me like a knife. You are no longer my responsibility. I realized that I was truly on my own. He had chosen her, that woman who despised us, over his own blood. It was a betrayal deeper than anything I could imagine. But instead of letting that betrayal break me, I let it fuel me. I was barely in my 20s when I was thrown into a world without shelter, stability, or support. My siblings looked at me with hungry eyes, not just for food, but for guidance. I couldn't let them starve. I couldn't let them collapse under the same weight I was carrying. The next few years were a blur of hardship. By day, I worked at construction sites carrying bricks, mixing cement, and laboring under the scorching sun. My body ached, my hands blistered, but I kept going. By night, I picked up small jobs delivering food on a bicycle, washing dishes in roadside stalls, anything that could bring in a little extra money. There were nights when I collapsed into bed so exhausted I couldn't even eat. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father and that woman, sitting comfortably while we suffered. That image reminded me why I had to keep moving. My siblings also tried to help in their small ways. My younger sister, only 15 at the time, started stitching clothes for neighbors. My brother found work at a mechanic's shop. Together, we built a fragile survival. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Meanwhile, my father and his wife continued their life. I would occasionally hear stories about them, how they were spending money carelessly, buying things they didn't need, throwing parties while we barely had food. Each time I heard those stories, my anger grew, but so did my determination. I started saving every coin I could. I refused to waste even a single cent. Slowly, those coins became bills, and those bills became something more. I learned how to budget, how to plan, how to think ahead. Survival was no longer enough. I wanted stability. And so, I started learning. At night, after long hours of work, I borrowed books from libraries. I taught myself basic business skills, how to manage money, how markets worked. I had no mentor, no teacher. But I had hunger, the kind of hunger that pushes you to absorb everything. There were times I wanted to give up, times when my body was too tired, when my siblings cried themselves to sleep, when the future seemed too dark. But every time, I reminded myself, one day, they will pay for what they did to us. One day they will be the ones suffering. Years passed like this. I moved from one job to another, slowly climbing the ladder. I worked at a grocery store, then as a delivery assistant, then as a helper in a small food stall. It was at that stall that I discovered something important: people loved the food I cooked. I remembered the recipes my mother used to make. Her warm bread, her seasoned stews, her flavorful soups. I tried them out in the stall, and customers started coming back asking for more. For the first time, I saw a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was my path forward. I convinced the stall owner to let me cook regularly. Business grew, and with it, my confidence. Customers would ask for me by name. They smiled, they complimented, they paid extra sometimes. That small stall became my first real training ground, not just in cooking, but in learning how people work, how businesses grow, how trust is built. Still, life was not easy. My father never once checked on us. He never asked if we had food, never offered shelter, never cared if we were alive. Whenever I saw him in the market with his wife, I felt invisible. He looked right through me as if I was a stranger. That kind of rejection could crush a person. But for me, it became fuel. I decided that if he saw me as nothing, then I would become something so big, so undeniable, that he would regret ever turning away. And so, I began planning my own small food business. It wasn't much at first, a tiny cart selling homemade meals on the roadside. I poured everything into it, the flavors of my mother's kitchen, the lessons I had learned, the sweat and blood of years of struggle. People came, people ate, people returned. Slowly, my name spread. Sam's Food was different. Sam's Food had soul. The woman who once mocked us for having nothing, who laughed as we were thrown out of our home, had no idea that the very boy she pushed into the streets was now building something far greater. But I didn't tell her. Not yet. Because revenge is not rushed. Revenge is patient, and my patience was only just beginning. Asterisk. The little food cart that once stood on a busy street corner became more than just a way to survive. It became a symbol of my determination. Every morning, before the sun rose, I prepared meals with my siblings. My sister kneaded dough while my brother chopped vegetables. I cooked with everything my heart had to give. The aroma would fill the streets, pulling people toward us. Office workers, laborers, students, they all stopped by for a taste of our food. Soon, our cart was no longer enough. With the money we saved, we opened a small shop. It was nothing fancy, just 4 walls, a counter, and a few wooden tables, but to me, it was the beginning of a dream. Customers loved it. They came in crowds, and word spread like wildfire. Sam's Kitchen, they called it. It became a place not just for food, but for comfort, for family, for warmth. People didn't just eat, they felt at home. While I was rising, my father and his wife were sinking. I didn't hear much about them at first, but the few rumors that reached me made me smile bitterly. They had been spending money recklessly, selling pieces of land, wasting fortunes on luxuries. My stepmother, who once walked around flaunting her jewelry, had begun pawning it off. One day, as I walked through the market, I saw her bargaining desperately with a gold seller. She looked older, thinner, her arrogance replaced by frustration. My father was nowhere in sight. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I walked past her without a word. She didn't even recognize me or stepson, the boy she had once denied food to. But life had bigger plans. Our small shop grew into 2, then 3. Within a few years, we had multiple branches. My siblings were no longer just helpers, they became partners. Together, we built a business that carried our mother's memory in every bite. The name Sam's Kitchen was now known across the city. We had staff, delivery vans, and even catering contracts. From the streets to the grand halls of events, my food was everywhere. And then came the day I never expected. My father showed up at one of my restaurants. He looked different. His shoulders had slumped. His eyes had lost their shine. He was not the man who once threw us out of our home. He was older, weaker, and dare I say, it broken. Behind him, his wife followed, her arrogance gone, replaced by exhaustion. They sat quietly at a table. I watched them from a distance, my heart torn between rage and pity. Should I serve them? Should I let them eat? Should I remind them of the nights I starved while they feasted? I walked over, calm but firm. "Welcome to Sam's Kitchen," I said. My father looked up, his eyes widening in recognition. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. My stepmother lowered her head, ashamed. I placed 2 glasses of water on their table. Nothing more. That silence was heavier than any storm. They left without eating. That night, I couldn't sleep. A part of me still longed for a father's love. But another part reminded me of the truth. This man had abandoned me, chosen someone else over his children, and thrown us into the streets. Justice was being served. Slowly, painfully. In the following months, I heard more about their downfall. My father's health was failing. The properties they had sold left them with almost nothing. His wife, once the center of attention, was now whispered about with pity. Meanwhile, my business reached new heights. I expanded into neighboring cities. I opened a bakery line, then a packaged foods brand. Investors came to me, offering deals. Newspapers published articles about the young man who built an empire from nothing. Every success I tasted carried the flavor of revenge. Not the loud, violent revenge of fists or weapons, but the quiet, undeniable revenge of success. And yet, I wasn't done, because fate had one last twist to offer. One evening, as I was leaving my office, I saw a group of beggars outside a bus station. Among them was a man I almost didn't recognize, thin, frail, shivering in the cold. It was my father, the man who once had wealth, land, power, the man who once said I was no longer his responsibility. Now he was sitting on the ground, stretching out his hand for coins. Beside him, his wife sat quietly, her face hollow, her pride gone. I stood there, frozen. 1,000 memories rushed through me: the hunger, the nights of pain, the rejection, the humiliation, and in that moment, I knew, revenge was complete. Not because I harmed them, not because I shouted or punished, but because life had given them exactly what they had given me: emptiness, abandonment, suffering. I turned away, walked to my car, and drove off. I had no need to say a word. The silence spoke louder than anything I could have ever said. I often sit by my office window late at night, staring at the city lights that twinkle like stars. Too many? I am a success story, a man who rose from dust to build an empire. To me, I am still that boy who once cried alone in a dark room, waiting for a father who never came. People think revenge is loud, violent, and bloody, but my revenge was quiet. It came through patience, through endurance, through sheer willpower. I never lifted a hand against my father or his wife. I didn't need to. Life itself became my weapon. When I remember the day I saw them begging, I feel a strange mix of emotions. A part of me wanted to walk over, place money in his hand, and say, "Now you understand." Another part wanted to ignore him completely, but I did neither. I simply stood there, watching, not as his son, but as a stranger who had once been his child. My father had a choice. Long ago, he could have loved me, protected me, and stood by my side. Instead, he chose greed, lust, and betrayal. And now, in the final chapter of his life, he was reaping the seeds he had sown. Even today, I remember my mother, the way she smiled while cooking, the way she held me when I was scared. She would never have let things become this way. She would have fought for us. She would have loved us without condition. Sometimes I wonder if she had lived longer, would my life have been different? Would my father still have abandoned me? But life doesn't give us what if, it gives us reality. And reality is that my father chose another woman over his own blood. He sold our home, stole our security, and threw us to the streets. That memory will never leave me. It is carved into my soul, but the story doesn't end in sadness. My siblings and I rebuilt ourselves brick by brick. Today they stand tall beside me, not as dependents, but as equals. My sister runs our bakery chain. My brother handles logistics. Together, we turned hunger into power, pain into determination, rejection into triumph. When I look at them, I don't just see my siblings. I see warriors, survivors, proof that family is not defined by a father's presence, but by the strength we create together. I never sought to destroy my father. I never went to court to strip him of power. I never shouted in his face or cursed his name, because the most painful revenge is not what you do, it's what you don't do. I didn't save him. I didn't give him shelter. I didn't show him mercy. I simply lived my life better than he ever thought I could. And that, in the end, was enough. My final words to him: if my father were standing before me today, I would not scream. I would not cry. I would simply say, "You had a son who loved you more than life itself. You chose to throw him away. And now, when you look into my eyes, you see what you lost. That is your punishment. That is your hell." And then I would turn my back forever. To anyone listening to my story, remember this: you may be betrayed. You may be abandoned. You may even be left alone to starve. But never let that define you. Use your pain. Use your scars. Turn them into fire that fuels your journey, because success is the sweetest revenge, and silence is the loudest answer. What would you do if your own father abandoned you for another woman? Would you forgive, or would you seek revenge like me? Write your thoughts in the comments below. Also, tell me from which city and country you're watching this video. Makes me feel connected to all of you. And if you believe no child should ever face betrayal from their own parent, share this video so the world remembers.